when you kind of look at the history of film and cinema as a whole, you see these big dips in studios. You could see that back in the 70s and 80s with like Martin Scorsese coming onto the scene and being like super indie and having these extremely low budgets. While you look at the studio films coming out at the time with huge budgets that are flopping. And they can't figure out why, and then eventually they figure out that these indie creators are making successful movies, so they hire them to make low-budget movies at their studios. Studios start to gain power. They start to have these really great creative films, and then the budgets start to go up, 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 up. Box office goes down, down, down. Indie goes up, up, up. Studios go up as they hire them. And I think we're in that kind of dip again.
I made my first film when I was probably 14 or 15 years old using my godfather's camcorder. I made a Blair Witch-esque spoofy film with my god brother. Is that the term? God brother at the time, my godfather's son. And it was terrible. It was god-awful. I don't think I've watched it since I made it. I have it on a VHS tape somewhere around here. I can't bring myself to look at it. But something that was very obvious to me when I made it was that whatever process I was engaged in during the making, that was something I wanted to do over and over and over again. Time went on. I got more and more into acting, which was really the vehicle for me into filmmaking. And I, learned as I went. I made little films with friends. I made films in college. I just kind of chipped away at it until in my mid to late 20s, I started seriously thinking about making a film that costs money, that I had to raise money for. And that ended up being this one right here that you can see the very bottom of the poster of, called Sarah and the Animals. And after it was done, and it took years to complete, after it was done, I was even more certain that I wanted to keep creating. This led me to be a part of a filmmaking and acting community in Portland, Oregon, which is where I met today's guest. Ashton Livingston is one of the most tenacious filmmakers I've ever come across. I was lucky to ask to be a part of his film, which we're going to talk a lot about in this episode, really early on in the process. And so I got a lot of insights into sort of the development of the project all the way up through the filming of the project and then post-production as well, which is where the film is now. I wanted to have Ashton on for a few reasons. First off, I just wanted to catch up. We haven't seen each other in a while. He's a friend of mine. We've made projects, plural, together at this point, and he helped me with film that I did recently that you're going to hear more about as the show goes on. But then secondly, I saw that he was crowdfunding for post-production for Rat Problem, and I just thought, man, this is a guy who has really spent the last few years of his life in service of a project, and he's built it from the ground up. He's figured out a way to fund it. He's figured out the way to make it. He's done everything. And I started to think about how I have seen him change in the time that from when I first met him to now because of having engaged with this project. So I wanted to talk to him about that. I wanted to talk to him about what it's like to be living an artistic life, because this is his first film outside of school. I wanted to ask him what I thought he might be able to share with you. Is it worth it to pursue an artistic life? Is there something different that a life that's wrapped around artistry might offer that a life that's more, incorporated with mundane stuff, non-artistic stuff might not offer? So we talked about that. We talked about the artistic life. We talked about filmmaking. We talked about crowdfunding. We talked about what it takes to actually make a film. We talked about the state of independent film, studio film. It's a really film-centric episode, not gonna lie. We talked about his film, my film. We talked about all sorts of stuff. So if you're interested in what it sounds like when a couple of scrappy filmmakers get together and talk shop, this is going to be a great episode for you. If you are interested in what it takes to make your own independent film, specifically if it's horror, which is the world that Ashton and I both live in cinematically, this is going to be a great episode for you. And if you're just curious about maybe shifting your own life towards something that incorporates a little bit more artistry, you're going to hear a lot of what that would mean, not just the good stuff about it, but what's hard about the artistic life. What are the things you have to deal with on a daily basis? All of that is going to be in this episode for you. Thank you so much for checking out Beyond the Walled Garden. Hope you enjoy. We met, thank you for doing this, by the way.
Not a problem.
I should be gracious, but I frequently am not because I am an asshole. So we met by way of a little film called Rat Problem, which is currently in post-production. I think the best way to start this conversation would just be introduce the film, your role in the film, my role in the film, and where the film currently is at.
So I am the writer and one of the writers and the director of Rat Problem, which is a 1980s retro creature feature horror comedy, which stars you as well as China Ray Shirts. China plays the character of Liz, which is this kind of like down on her luck, kind of poor convenience store clerk who clocks into a shift from hell with her manager Darren, who you so eloquently play. Who he's a jackass. It's great. He's like a really dumb jackass. But it happens when her shift from hell happens when a bunch of rats show up at the store in which she works, the Maxi Mart. And from there, rat chaos ensues with green blood, human blood, your blood specifically, and a whole mess of things.
Yeah, great summation. I love this. It's very reminiscent of a kind of 80s horror, creature horror. Like, what sort of films would you say that it's like?
I pulled a lot from The Stuff, Gremlins, Critters, just a lot of those kind of like weird ghoulies. I liked the movies where like a little tiny thing is skittering around that just causes chaos for no reason. Yeah, those were always my favorite. I love like little tiny chaotic beings. They're my favorite, and I also love puppets. So it kind of just came out of there.
And we did have very cool rat puppets.
Oh yeah.
For this.
They were awesome. I loved working with them. They looked so fun, and it was like exactly the cartooniness I wanted to pull.
Yeah, totally. So currently it's in post,
yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes. There is currently an edit of the film. Unfinished, obviously, but there is an edit. We're chopping it down more and more to make it, a good, slim, tight 15 to get it into festivals and all that. But it's really fun. I know on set, there was a lot of moments where people were kind of like, why is the camera moving like this? And why does it do that? But once it's all edited together, it makes so much sense. So it's looking real good. It looks awesome.
Well, that's awesome, dude. And good on you and the DP for knowing that it would make sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it took a lot of me and Eli, the DP, just kind of being like, it flows into this shot and all that good stuff, because in this one there's a lot of crazy camera movements, because another big inspiration for this was like Sam Raimi's Evil Dead trilogy, and capturing like the crazy camera movements that Sam Raimi does in all of his films was like super important to me. So
yeah. So this brings to mind something. I've just sort of been thinking about this for the last few years in general, especially I lived in Portland, as you know, until a few months ago, and I worked a fair amount with the film community in Portland, and I'd seen this other places, but it did feel especially concentrated in Portland. But I see it down here too, and I saw it in New York where I lived before Portland, even there. And I'm curious to get your thoughts about this, because I'm a little bit older than you. You're fresh out of school.
Yeah.
You're really in, I would say, the early stages of your filmmaking career. And you've made this film Rap Problem. I'm looking behind you. I'm seeing posters from 70s and 80s horror. And I know so many directors, filmmakers right now who are living in that same place, that kind of retro aesthetic. They're putting retro effects on in Resolve. They're trying to get film grain, and even the style of storytelling, the script construction, the references, all of it is just retro. Like everything is retro, retro, retro. And I've thought about this a lot, but I don't think I know why. Like,
Yeah.
I'm curious to get what about it appeals to you.
So for me, it starts a lot with kind of the movies my dad put me on growing up. My dad was, he's ex-Mormon, grew up in the Mormon church, and during his time as like a kid, there were all these movies he wasn't allowed to see. And, he was born in 79, so growing up through the 80s and all that, there was tons of great movies he definitely missed out on. And so growing up, he kind of wanted to go back and catch some of them with me and show me some of the ones he did grow up with. And it was just a ton of like 80s fun. One of the first movies that really sticks out to me is a Fred Savage and, oh God, what's his name? He's the bald dude on America's Got Talent. Howie Mandel.
Yeah, this is Monster?
Little Monsters. Yeah.
Little Monsters, that's right.
Yeah. That movie like had a permanent effect on my brain chemistry as a child. And it was one of those movies where it was like super okay for kids until like a certain point where it just like becomes like really scary for some reason. Like the main villain is like a guy who's wearing human skin over his monster form, and it's like all pulled back. And so that kind of triggered something in my brain where it's like, this is the kind of movie I love. And from there, growing up, I kind of just started consuming more and more stuff from that time period and delving more and more into like just actual like 80s horror. And so it just became this kind of thing that I was super fixated on. And I was like, these are the kind of movies I want to be making. Like I love horror. I love modern horror. You're starting to see this a little bit more now, but as I was kind of starting to come up, or get into school and all that, there was like this big kind of push for horror to be almost taken more seriously by being more serious, where I kind of was like, I love serious horror. I love movies like Midsommar and Hereditary and all those kind of movies, but I also think there should be an appreciation for the campy, silly stuff too. And that's the stuff I grew up on, I was in love with. And so that was the stuff that I wanted to make and for people to enjoy. So that's kind of like why I go the 80s route, or that kind of retro film look, because it's the stuff that I kind of was raised on by my dad. And I have like this really great connection with all of those pieces of media and how they look, and I just want to like make stuff like that. I want to make the fun, campy stuff like that I think people laugh at and love. So that's my connection to all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes, I think of like Skinamarink or something like that.
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes if, there's a kind of like cultural longing going on. And maybe that's part of what this retro, this jolt backwards is like trying to do, or like The Last Drive-In, which I know we've talked about and we both love. I'm old enough that I remember watching Joe Bob's show on PBS when it was on cable. And even then, that back then, what was interesting was retro felt. When I think it changed, honestly, dude, was House of a Thousand Corpses. Around then, and maybe Zombie was the guy who did it, or he was a part of the class of people who did it. Around then, it went from, yeah, this 70s, 80s stuff is like, it was fine, but we're moving on. We're in meta horror land. We're in Scream land. We're in like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mention that because, I mean, me and Odie, my partner, have always talked about how House of a Thousand Corpses feels very much in line with Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And it really harnesses that kind of like neon 80s hellbilly vibe. Like that one compared to like the rest of his like House of a Thousand Corpses franchise movies feel very like soaked in neon and campy and just kind of fun. And it's always reminded me of the like very huge tone shift Tobe Hooper took when transitioning that franchise into the 80s to kind of keep up with where horror was at that time period.
Right, yeah. And maybe that's part of why those remakes, because that was also around House of a Thousand Corpses when we started getting the I would say remakes that were closer to what would go on to become the Ari Asters of the world. The like, you know, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, which was fine, but you know, it's not, it's missing some integral element of the original that you really can't capture again. But they did it to all of those movies. They remade them all. They made them grounded in a way that the originals weren't ever intended to be. And it was like some part of the spirit of it was gone. Do you resonate with the, I mean, you did, if maybe before I even get into this question, just so the audience knows what I'm talking about, so I'm not being vague about this, you crowdfunded for Rat Problem.
Yeah.
And I will say I've been a part of a lot of productions that crowdfunded. I've crowdfunded myself once. I did not do 1/10 of the amount of things you did to raise money for Rat Problem. I don't think I know any filmmakers who have done as much stuff as you did to try and raise money for this movie. So before we get into like, I do have a question or a conversation that I think would be cool to have about crowdfunding and sort of like how it might be connected to an 80s VHS style of filmmaking.
Yeah.
It's not really a thing anymore. But before we get into that, can you just like briefly give us like the highlight, what crowdfunding was like for you, some of the things you did?
It was hell, I'll say that.
It sucks.
It's not fun, I'll say that. It's fun, but it's not fun. That was like a really, really stressful time in my life. We had about 60 days or so to raise $10,000 or more. And it was every day waking up, doing something. I had to post to social media. I had to go out and do something. If I didn't have like an event scheduled that I was going to go to and talk about the movie, I was doing podcasts. I literally made a sign that said, donate to help me make my rat movie. And I like had like photos of like rats on it and the QR code to our crowdfunding site. And I would walk around Portland with it. I would like walk around and like people would be like, what's the rat movie? And so I'd just give them the pitch and they'd be like, that sounds fun. Here's $20. And so it was just all these things of just trying to like sell the movie. It felt like every day I had the pitch so down. It was like the second thing out my mouth half the time. But it was almost like just dedication to that, because I felt like if I didn't raise the 80% or more we needed to greenlight the film off the crowdfunding site we were on, I was like, this movie's over. There's no way we can make it. And this is the thing I'm kind of riding on right now. Like, I need to make this movie. And it was just every day I had to be doing 5 or more things to try and get money on the movie. And I even used my job. I'm the manager of the 99W Drive-In in Oregon. And I started programming there. That was at first just used to like pretty much be like, hey guys, here's a 80s horror movie you love. Here's a movie I'm making that's inspired by these 80s horror movies. If you want to see it, give me your money, kind of thing. And I did that, and it was just every day I had to do something. It was basically the thing that kept me going. But when we hit that green light, I was like, okay, I can rest. I can rest now. It was like probably the most stressful like 60 days of my life. It was insane.
Wow, what did you learn? I mean, talk to baby Ashton. Go back in time.
What I would
Baby
learn,
Ashton's about to start.
yes, it was helpful, but you also need to make time for other things. It's really great to be that motivated. I was really, really motivated to get this thing done, but it also was like, I don't think any human being should be operating under that much stress. It was almost like, for me, it was comparable to like, oh my God, there's nothing in my bank account. How am I gonna like go about right now? It was like I felt like everything depended on me making this movie. Like I'm that passionate about making this movie right now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is like the next big step for me. This is what's gonna help me get to be known as a director, really. Because all I had done up to that point was student films for school and nothing really like on my own kind of deal. And so it was really just like being motivated, but I definitely tell myself, like, you need to take a chill pill. Like, you need time to relax. And I think that's one thing. Whenever I hear other people are like crowdfunding their movies, I tell them, you're going to have to do something every day, something big to get in people's faces, but you also need to take time for you. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's something really important. I think a lot of these people crowdfunding should know is it is so stressful, but you also need to make time for yourself so you can be human and calm down and not operate on this high stress level all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I resonate with that. I wonder too, like, what were the most successful aspects of your crowdfunding campaign? Like, is there anything you did that it was like, I would do that again because that for sure worked?
We did raffles at my job. The movies I was playing, I would go out and I'd buy merchandise tied to the movies, and I would raffle them off, like $5 raffles, gets you a chance at winning all of this stuff. And people like winning stuff. They like paying $5 to win $50 worth of stuff. And so if you have like 20 or more people who are like, here's $20, how many like raffle tickets can that get me? Then it's like, okay, you've made like 50, $100. And it's like,
Gotcha.
It was super successful to do that. I loved doing that because it was also a way for people to talk with you and ask you why you're doing a raffle, what's it for, kind of thing. And you get to sell them your movie, like just face to face, and they can ask you questions back about it. And it was just an extremely like personal way to get people to invest in the movie. And after you sold them on the movie, they'd probably be like, all right, well, here's some more money just for the movie, not for the raffle, kind of thing. So just like kind of getting people involved was really, just talking to them is really helpful. And I loved doing that. That was one of my favorite things.
I think that's really smart. And we did that for 15 to Sunrise. We didn't do a raffle, but you have a lovely death, by the way. I know you haven't seen it yet, but your death is very... Ashton came very kindly and came with their partner and was an extra in this vampire film that is like probably going to be out this time next month. It's very close. You got killed by one of our vampires and you were great in it. You die very well.
I love hearing that I die well.
You died very well. But we did an event for that when we were crowdfunding, and we did a blood rave, which was not explicitly connected to the film in any way. We just knew a guy who had a bar that was a big part of the production, and we were like, let's throw a vampire rave. And that's the night we raised the most money on. So
Yeah, no, like getting community involved is like the best way to sell people on your money or your movie and raise money. And it's also just fun. Like
yeah.
as the filmmaker, it's so much fun to like have people really respond and resonate to what you're doing. I loved it.
Yeah, because it feels different too than all this like social media posting.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
I don't know how effective would you say like the constant updates on social media were for your
It
project?
depended on what we were doing, really. If we were showing them something of the movie, like if it was like concept art of the rats, people would be like, "Ooh, I like that. Here's $25." If it when we launched our like kind of promo video, people loved that and they wanted to see more, so that shot our donations up quite a bit. But it was stuff that was like, here's what the film's going to be like really like. That was the kind of stuff that helped us. And then a bit of the more personal content, like here's people on the crew and the producers and all them talking about the movie and why they're excited. That stuff really helps people connect with it. I think seeing the humanity in it and the want and the need to make that movie is what people resonate with.
Yeah, that's great. I wanna zoom out for a bit here. This may be a kind of odd question, but you know, part of why I wanted to have you on was we're on this show. We're kind of tackling this question from a bunch of different vantage points, and the question just being like, what are some alternative ways to be in the world right now that are more generative, that aren't going to take as much from you, that aren't inherently manipulative,
Yeah.
or turning you into a product, or turning you into, even worse, I think, an attention vehicle, because everything is about attention now, and people are just willingly giving it away without realizing how valuable it is every day. And I was thinking a lot about art recently, and thinking about, you know, that is one area. It's strangely, it's the area that I live in the most, but it's the area I've talked about the least so far on this show. And so I'm curious, you know, you've gone through, you're almost on the back edge, meaning you're getting closer to release on this film.
Yeah.
You know, like there, for people who aren't familiar with the filmmaking process, basically, you know, the old adage, I found it to be true. I would assume you have as well. Tell me if you haven't. But the old adage about filmmaking is that every time you direct a film or make a film in any way, you're really making three films. There's the film that you're writing, there's the film that you're shooting, and there's the film that you're editing. And those are very different.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So the process to do those things is different, and what you're trying to accomplish is different each time. And every single one of them, in my experience anyway, takes some other huge part of you to navigate well. And some people are really good, for instance, at navigating the writing part, but they suck at post part. Some are really good at production, but they suck at writing. Like, it's really rare that you come out of the gate and you're just great at all three parts of the filmmaking process. I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I've definitely been kind of the way I handle post is pretty much, we have a great editor on the film, Amy Laurie, and we handed the footage to her and I was like, here's the script. I trust you. I can't edit. I think you'll make this work far better than I could editing. So I kind of like took a step back, and then when I see an edit, I'm like, okay, I like it. Here's notes. And then it's kind of like, I don't see it again. And then I'm like, okay, I should probably work on other things too. Like,
yeah.
So
live your life outside of this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like, I should probably take a step back so I can, you know, think about things and get other parts of post flowing and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I try to think about like Like, in my head, obviously, I can see the movie. That was how it was when writing it and directing it. But in post, it's just like, I gotta kill so many little babies that I put love and effort, and the actors put love and effort into as well. And so it's just kind of like, all right, gotta cut this, gotta cut that, and try it, and also be like, make the film still feel good and make sense and flow well, but also knowing what you're gonna have to cut and let go of. It's a lot of work.
Thanks so much for watching this episode. We're going to get right back to the interview, but before we do, I just want to ask you, please, if you have a moment, consider liking and subscribing and leaving a comment on whatever platform you happen to be partaking of Beyond the Walled Garden. As you will no doubt know by now, we have all sorts of people on the show. We've got artists, we've got public servants, we've got business owners, we've got a bunch of people. Everybody is oriented toward the same goal, giving you a different perspective on what it means to be alive in the modern age, different ways of thinking, navigating the world to maybe try and have a little bit more of a qualitative experience, something that doesn't feel as terrible to live. So I feel like this episode is definitely accomplishing that, especially if you are someone who is interested in artistic life. I'm not going to ramble on and keep you from the interview anymore. Let's get back to the show. Okay, so now you're almost on the back end of it. You're about to get the big moment, right? Which is the release. I don't know whatever your release is going to look like for you. That's another thing that's very project specific in my experience. So now that you've gone through this whole process, or you're just about having gone through the whole process, what do you think this all adds to your life? I mean, you're a smart guy. You are in, it seems like you're in a very supporting, loving relationship. Your partner is a lovely human being. You have all these great interests. You're charismatic. You're friendly. You could do a lot. I mean, like,
thank you.
You could do you could, whatever you wanted to do, I'm sure you could figure out how to do. You're tenacious. You're personable. You got all these great qualities. Filmmaking, art making in general, and having a life that is wrapped around art making is brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal in so many ways. Are you, now that this is your first film out of school, are you still wanting to pursue that? And if so, why?
I mean, absolutely. For me, like, even before I got to college for film, I wanted to make movies for forever. It's been like just the huge drive for me, and I can't let those instincts in my brain go. It's such a big part of how I think, about how I feel. I've always just felt connected to cinema, and especially the horror genre. I have always felt so deeply involved and connected in it, and I just can't let it go. For me personally, there are things I'd change in the industry. There's things I'd change about going about it. I mean, film is such a intensive process of making things. It is. You're on set for up to 16 hours a day sometimes. I hear so many people talk about how it feels impossible to have a life outside of it sometimes. And that is a huge struggle that I know so many people face, especially when here in Portland, the industry feels so dependent on season. Because it's like, okay, I have to have a part-time job outside of that. And the industry itself, you'll have times where it's like, hey, can you show up tomorrow? And it's like, I wish I could, but I have to have a job to support myself when I can't do these things. And that's kind of the thing where it's like, oh, okay, bye. And you're like, did I just lose a connection entirely? So it's something where it is incredibly demanding. And I know you know that as well. It feels like you have to give up so much all the time for it. But you also have that great reward of being on set with people who are very supportive and love what they're doing, and that radiates into the work. And being on set is both incredibly stressful but so much fun at the same time when things are going well. And it's such a great thing to be doing, to be making art, but there is also that part of it where inherently you're spending money to make this. It's a business, and the business side of things becomes incredibly stressful, I'd say. And I see that side really wear and tear on people a lot.
Yeah. I saw something, those are all great points. I saw something yesterday. I'm just sharing this with as many people as I possibly can because I am very checked out of news on purpose. And so sometimes I'll get really excited. I'll share something and then the person will be like, yeah, everybody knows that. So apologies if everybody knows what I'm about to say. But I saw yesterday that in California, 46 of the 51 film projects that got rebates from, like, major rebates from the state government last year. Or no, these are prospective rebates, sorry. They got approved for prospective rebates. So these are films that are in production that are going to get rebates from the state later. And just blanket general statement. What I'm talking about here is, for people who don't know how film works, every state has its own incentive package to try and incentivize production in the state. And the reason that states want to do that is because if Ashton decides he's going to make the feature version of Rat Problem and he gets a $5 million budget to do it, he's going to have to hire 180 people to do that. Those people are going to be what we call above the line. So those are the producer, the director of photography, the main actor. So these are people who he's probably going to hire from either his direct community or a film community that's got a bunch of prestige built into it, like Los Angeles or New York or Atlanta. But then everybody below the line, which is the vast majority of the people who make the movies, those are people like caterers, costume assistants, PAs who are like running errands. Those people are hired in the community that you're filming in most of the time. And so if you're the governor of a state and Ashton walks up and he says, I want to hire 140 people in your state for the next 6 months to make this movie, what do you give me? A lot of states already have an answer built in. Usually that is by way of a percentage kickback on your taxes once the film is completed. So if Ashton spends $4 million in the state of Georgia, for instance, I don't actually know what Georgia's is, but let's say he spends $4 million in the state of Georgia. Georgia has it built into their state tax program that you can get 25% of that $4 million back as a tax rebate if you film in that state and meet certain criteria. So then Ashton goes, he shoots the movie, he spends, all of that $4 million knowing that he's going to get 25% of it back in a year and a half or whatever. And he can use that as leverage to fund the movie. Okay, so California's rebates this year, 46 out of the 51 of them went to independent films. That is non-studio films. Most of the studios are now filming outside of California, and a lot of them are filming outside of the country entirely for a lot of reasons. But the big reason they're filming outside the country is China. In case you don't know, China owns probably almost every, if not every, movie theater in your town right now. They also own a big part of distribution, and they have a really strong foothold in production companies too. So China is increasingly gaining power in the country. So it kind of, if you're a big studio, it makes a lot more sense these days to film in Asia than it does in the United States. And a lot of studios are doing that. But anyway, I say all this to say, it does seem like we are kind of in an era where if cinema is going to continue to be an important part of cultural conversation, it's going to be independent cinema, not studio cinema anymore. And it seems like state governments are starting to treat it that way. Do you think that that's true? And do you think that the kind of way that you're starting to do filmmaking, which is this, I would say it's very similar, or at least from an outside perspective, it feels very similar to the way they did it in the VHS boom, which is just like, let me get a small budget, a small team, and let me go out there and do it. A Trauma style, something like that. Do you feel like that's where things are headed?
Yeah, so when you kind of look at the history of film and cinema as a whole, you see these big dips in studios. You could see that back in the 70s and 80s with like Martin Scorsese coming onto the scene and being like super indie and having these extremely low budgets, while you look at the studio films coming out at the time with huge budgets that are flopping. And they can't figure out why, and then eventually they figure out that these indie creators are making successful movies, so they hire them to make low-budget movies at their studios. Studios start to gain power. They start to have these really great creative films, and then the budgets start to go up, 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 up. Box office goes down, down, down. Indie goes up, up, up. Studios go up as they hire them. And I think we're in that kind of dip again. I think we're in that dip of these huge studio movies with incredibly huge budgets just bombing. Bomb after bomb after bomb. I mean, if you look at like theaters right now, like I work at 2 movie theaters right now. They are dead. They are so slow right now. And it's because these movies have huge budgets, they aren't marketing them well, or it's kind of soulless IP. Like right now you have Captain America 4, which bombed horrifically. You have the new Snow White out right now, which is also going to bomb horrifically. And you have just all of these IP movies that have hundreds of millions of dollars of budget that they will never make back. These movies have to make like $1 billion or more to make any form of money. That's impossible. It's an impossible task for them to do that. But you have indie filmmakers right now making these movies that are making their budget back. There's one studio I will say that is pretty smart about this is Blumhouse. They give their teams pretty small budgets, throw the movie out into theaters, it'll make its budget back no problem because it was made on such a low budget. But like these indie films that people are making, they're going to make their budget back most of the time, and they are really creative. They're films that a studio would be too afraid to make. And I mean, right now you're probably seeing this too. Studios are like, how many Instagram followers does that actor have? Or is this based off an IP? Oh, it's not? Then we're not going to take the risk of making it. That is a huge thing we're seeing right now within the studio system, and it's really scary. But you're also seeing indie filmmakers on the rise. Like you said, the 46 rebates of indie film in California. Even the states are starting to recognize the studios are falling behind. And the studios aren't doing their jobs anymore. I mean, Warner Brothers right now, they have had bomb after bomb. Disney's had bomb after bomb. And they're banking on these projects that are far off. Like, you know, Disney's got Fantastic Four coming out this summer. They're banking on that. Warner Brothers has Superman. They're banking on that. Universal has the Jurassic World. They're banking on that. They're banking on these movies with huge budgets to hopefully make something. And I don't think we're going to be seeing that really happen. Indie film is always going to be the way to show audiences new things. Audience will connect with it. They'll want more of that. Hopefully studios will recognize that and hire these young directors and let them make original projects with smaller budgets that get wide release distribution. And from then, hopefully, you know, we start to see those things go back up. But I tend to see cinematic history as just hills and valleys. And I think right now we're in a pretty deep valley, but we're starting to see a hill.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly encouraging. There are films that seem to be navigating even indie horror. There are films that seem to be navigating it in an interesting way that it incorporates a lot of like elements that the studios are struggling to incorporate. I'm thinking specifically of Long Legs, which had everybody, you know, if you didn't see Long Legs, the thing that's important to know about it is that it had everybody at the time before it even came out was saying this is one of the most genius marketing strategies I've ever seen. There's a phone number. I'll see if I can find it. I have it in my phone somewhere, and I'll put it in the description if I can find it. There's a phone number you used to be able to call while Long Legs was in theaters, and maybe it still is. You can still call it, and it was just Nick Cage singing "Happy Birthday."
Yeah,
and that was it.
Yeah, no,
in character.
Yeah,
right.
There she is. What's your name, little angel? Nice to meet you. Oh. I'll be waiting.
The kind of understanding of where the audience is, you know, and the kind of experience that is actually going to convert them from someone who's interested in a film to someone who will actually go see the film. Like, that's a much steeper climb than it used to be, because there's so many options that you could do on any given night. Why would you go to a theater? Like, it's harder to convince people to go, especially when you can probably torrent a version of the movie 2 weeks before it comes out. So it's not even going to the theater to see the movie anymore. You're paying money to do something that you could do for free at home.
Yeah, it's pretty. And I mean, I work at an independent theater and I work at a franchise theater, and you know, it's always complaining about theater prices too. There's that too. It's so expensive, and at a time when people are really struggling too, it's just not convenient for a lot of people. And streaming in some ways has been beneficial for that. Like, people will have new stuff to watch, but it's also been, you could have seen a movie in theaters that could have done well, but you know, they just kind of dump it onto streaming, and now it gets kind of lost in the trog of that. So
right. Well, even streaming, I see hope for independent stuff in streaming too, because, you know, famously Netflix is the only profitable long-term profitable streaming company there is. There is no other profitable streaming company right now. All the others are either going back and forth between profitable and not profitable. That's like a Disney or a Hulu. Or they're just straight up like, we're not anywhere close to profitability and we don't care, because the streaming is one small part of a larger ecosystem. That's where Apple's at, for instance. Apple loses so much money, but they don't care. They're like, whatever, it's 0.001% of our business. We're just doing it to have cultural relevance, really. So something like Apple I see is like, well, okay, if it doesn't matter to you if you make money back, then that's a great spot for independent film.
I will say Apple is probably like the most creative streaming service. They have some of the best like creative TV shows. You got Severance on there right now. You have, you know, it's forgetting the name of the show, the Jason Segel, Harrison Ford show.
Shrinking.
Yeah, that one's great.
Like that.
They have a ton of great original shows on there that I think are really just creative, independent based.
Yeah.
And I kind of love Apple for wanting to take that jump.
I know. I think it's because they don't care as much. You know, about they're not as concerned with meeting a bottom line, which is, it's weird, but when you're making something independent, you do have to kind of detach yourself, or I feel this way. Let me know if you feel this way. You do kind of have to detach yourself from the idea that this is a venture that's going to make you money.
Oh yeah.
Directly, like it's probably not.
Yeah, no. When making Rap Problem, it was never for me about like money. I mean, I've gone on to make a few other things like producing wise, and it's for me it's just like I don't really care about money. It's more I just want to help make this thing and put it out there. Independent. I know so many people who are like, I don't really do this for money anymore kind of thing. So
yeah, I'm certainly in that camp. It's like, even me being in LA now and doing some, roles acting wise that are more profitable and bigger audiences and stuff. There's still this part of me, and maybe it comes from doing independent stuff for so long. There's this part of me that's just like, I've become disenchanted with large film. Like I've become the whole idea of like studio, big yada yada, like if I'm honest with you, if you remove the paycheck from the equation and you come to me and you say, okay, here's 2 roles, one of which is to play Bruce Wayne in the next Batman reboot. And the other is to play the manager at the douchey manager in a convenience store that just berates his employee until giant radiated rats kill everybody. And the paychecks are the same. It's the rat movie for me every time, even if the release of the Batman movie is like global, because I think something broke for me years ago, learning a little bit of how the sausage is made and what it takes to make those bigger kinds of movies and the impact that they go on to have versus the smaller ones, the ones that are more bold, more original, more creative. Those are just more fun to be a part of. So I guess here's my question for you. Here's what I think this would be a good place to wrap up, because I feel like part of the reason I wanted to work with you on Rap Problem in the first place is because I feel a kinship with you and a lot of other filmmakers, especially in the Portland scene, but also here. I'm starting to meet people here, and there's a lot of, I don't know how much you know about LA, but there is a great horror, metal, dark scene here that I'm starting to be in, and I'm so happy about it. So they're everywhere. I got into this whole thing in the first place because I've had this draw toward a certain kind of film and a certain kind of media and music and art, and it was dark and it was, bloody and it was sexy and it was alluring and it was evocative, and that I still feel that draw toward that stuff all these years later. I've got to believe, Ashton, that there are young people around the country right now who are isolated in small communities, who are, waking up and checking their phones and finding themselves so disinterested and bored with what they're seeing in the world, and they're in their heads they're going to see films, or they're watching streaming, and they're saying, man, I would love to do something like that, but I don't know how. I don't know where to. I can't go to a city like Portland that's cool and filled with cool people and make something. I can't go to LA or New York or Atlanta or Austin. Like, I'm stuck. For those people, like, you're someone who figured it out. You figured out how to get the money and make the thing. What would you say to people who have this burgeoning interest and want to pursue it but don't know how to start?
So I grew up in a small hick town in Oregon. It's closer to, Portland. It's about an hour away. But I grew up in a town that had it was farm. You were a farmer. You were a farmer, or you made wine. That was what the town was. And I had a bunch of friends who were into all the kind of same stuff I was. And I'm gonna say, right now we're in a lucky enough place where cameras on our phones are really good. They're really good, and you can just point and shoot with your phone. That's kind of what I started doing, was just making movies on my phone with my friends and learning from those and learning what works, what doesn't work, how to do certain things. And I mean, I'm a huge physical media collector as well. I love the behind the scenes on like Blu-rays and all that kind of stuff. That was before I got into film school. That was my film school. And I'd say for people who don't have the ability to do that right now, or the ability to go to these cities and interact with the film community, start making stuff with your friends on your phone. That's what I did. Start making stuff with your friends on your phone, posting it to YouTube, sharing it around, getting advice on things, taking critique. That's how you learn and grow. You got to be able to take critique and learn and grow. And I mean, that's hard for anyone. It was hard for me, but it's really helpful to take that advice and those critiques and learn from them. And, hopefully, you learn enough and you start, saving up money and, buying more stuff to help make your stuff look better. But, you have a phone, and if you have friends, go out and start shooting stuff on your phone with your friends. Start writing fun little 2-3 page scripts, shoot them on your phone, edit them together. I mean, most computers nowadays have like a free editing software. Edit on there, slam it together, figure out what works, what doesn't work, and then post it to YouTube and start sharing that. That's where I got my start. And, granted, I went on to go to film school and all that, but that's kind of where I think a lot of people are starting now, is just making YouTube stuff and making videos on their phone that's fun for them. That's where I got my start. And, granted, I had a lot more access to stuff as I, moved away and all that. But, I mean, starting on your phone is like such a great way for young filmmakers, I'd say, and people who want to make stuff. And as much as I hate social media sometimes, it is also a great way to make connections for people. You can find the community you're looking for on social media and start interacting with them and learning how to, navigate those spaces. And again, that's another space where you can share the stuff you're making and get people to notice stuff. There's so many tools out there that we have access to because of technology now that I am thankful for and have helped me. And I think that's the kind of stuff people should be looking at, is, these people who, don't have access to stuff, but they're still trying to make stuff anyways.
That's great. That's great. And the only thing I would throw on the back of that too is, if you're not making stuff, you maybe just have to trust us when we say this, but if you're not making stuff and you're not happy with life, I promise you, just the act of making stuff will make you happier.
Oh, it does.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think one of the only reliable cures for me to anxiety, depression, overwhelm, whatever, exhaustion, one of the only reliable cures to those things is creating something. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, with all the baggage that it brings, it's still better than not creating something.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, so I would throw that in the mix too. Okay, this was fantastic. My last question, very last. How can people help get Rat Problem where it needs to get?
Yeah.
How can people support you where you're at? Give us the deets.
So Rat Problem is on Instagram at rat_problem_film. Let me double check that real quick. Make sure I got that correct.
Please do. Please do. I would also love to hear about
yes,
the films that you're producing.
Yeah.
And where people can support those.
Yes. So yeah, rat_problem_film. Follow that Instagram. GoFundMe's at the link in the bio. I've also produced some other stuff. I've produced a kind of crowdfunding promo for a film that just wrapped its production. That was internalized. That one was a lot of fun to produce the promo. And then I produced a crowdfunding promo that's still being edited. We're still tweaking that because we would just want to make sure it's perfect. And you can learn more about that at the Instagram, What We Create. That is going to be, or What We Create Film, all one word. That is a queer trans Frankenstein film written and directed by my partner Odie that I produce. It is like just soul crushing. It's about like death and being comfortable with all that. So look into that one. The Frankenstein design's awesome. We're still working on the crowdfunding promo and putting that out and trying to figure out how to really get people to get involved with it right now. Because, people are in a hard spot financially. So we want to figure it out specifically. But yeah, those are the kind of 3 projects I'm involved in. Rat Problem, donate to the GoFundMe, whatever you can helps. And just following the Instagram, sharing stuff on there helps us too. Same for What We Create. And then, and follow Internalized Film, the director on that one. He's great. And that's kind of the stuff that I have right now. And follow Joel if you aren't already. I don't know why you wouldn't be if you're listening to this podcast. But follow Joel. He's a great actor and just a great guy. And he's awesome. So follow him as well.
Oh, thanks, dude. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's
not a problem. Yeah, I loved it. It's great.
You can find a bunch of links related to what we talked about during today's episode down in the description. Please go check those out. Find out more about Ashton. Keep up to date with what Ashton's doing. He really is a filmmaker that I think you're going to want to watch. Definitely not someone who is going to dwell in obscurity for much longer, I believe. So, really, really cool moment to start following Ashton's career. You can say that you were in the know before Ashton was a household name. Follow all the links in the description. Follow Ashton. Follow the show. Thank you so much for checking out Beyond the Walled Garden, and I will see you in the next episode.